Throughout Nintendo's illustrious history, they've always had a tendency to release incredibly high-quality titles that have pushed them to the forefront of the video gaming industry. Huge franchises like Mario, Zelda, and Metroid have kept the company close to the top for almost 4 decades of creation. However, not every single game in their library can be a smash hit, and there have been several prominent misses throughout the years which have definitely put blemishes on Nintendo's record. In this video, I thought it'd be interesting to look at both the highest and lowest rated games for every Nintendo console, as the contrast between each title will help you understand why they received the reviews that they did. It took me a bit of researching to properly find each game I'm going to talk about, but in the end, I found a few from each end of the spectrum to showcase for you. I don't discriminate between exclusive or third-party releases, as good is good, and bad is most definitely bad. Oh yeah, and by the way, my name is Copycat, and if you want to see more videos like this one, then please subscribe to my channel, and hit that bell button to stay notified when I upload new videos. Nintendo's very first home console was the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was released in North America in 1985, and had a lifespan that lasted until 1995. To keep things simple for this video, I'm only going to look at North American released games, as I don't know much about the Japanese exclusives, and that could eventually become its own video. The NES had a large library of 667 North American titles, but it's no surprise that the highest rated game on this system was Super Mario Bros. 3. Any hardcore longtime Nintendo fan knows every single aspect of this amazing game, as it combines all the great elements of the first and second entries, while adding more power-ups and introducing an overworld which would become a staple of the franchise. In all my searching, the vast majority of reviews give the game a 9.5 out of 10, including reviews as recent as 2009, praising it for its gameplay, replayability, sound, and graphics. A UK-based magazine called Computer and Video Games commented that Super Mario Bros. 3 is the Mona Lisa of gaming, adding that it is astoundingly brilliant in every way, shape, and form. They even went as far as saying that it made Sonic the Hedgehog look like a wet Sunday morning. Ouch, sorry Sonic fans. Now, finding the lowest rated game for the NES was a bit harder, but in the end there was one that got critically panned across the board called Friday the 13th, developed by Atlas Studios and published by LJN. Now, LJN over the years has garnered the reputation as being one of the worst video game developers of all time, only ever concerned with licensing IP like movies, TV shows, and sports leagues, turning them into easy cash grab games. The production of their titles were always rushed, their gameplay was low quality, and the games themselves were full of glitches, all which can be seen in Friday the 13th. Nintendo Power Magazine back in 1997 ranked it as number 6 on the all-time worst list, commenting that playing a few minutes of this aardvark, I've never seen that as a diss, but this is apparently what it means, you wanted Jason to slaughter all the counselors and then you. Anything so it would just end. For people that may not know the Friday the 13th franchise, the original story that this game's based off followed a group of campers that become the target of an unstoppable madman named Jason Voorhees. Now, if that sounds like it would be an amazing horror game that would scare your pants off, well, you would be wrong in this case. With very bright pastel-y colors, more indicative of an adventure game, the objective is to upgrade your weapon so that you can defeat Jason 3 times before he kills all the campers. Jason isn't the only enemy in this game, as there are wolves, crows, and very out-of-place zombies that will attack you if you visit different locations trying to rescue different groups of kids. One of the best comments I've seen about this game comes from a World of Gameplay's videos comment section where RN hilariously states, Jason Voorhees is an unstoppable, supernatural force that cannot be reasoned with or killed, but he can be scared away by having rocks thrown at him. Nintendo's next console in their history was the revolutionary handheld Game Boy, which was released during the summer of 1989 and produced titles all the way until 2003. There were a few iterations of the system over the years, which led to an insane library of just over 1,000 titles. Finding the highest rated game from a console that spanned over a decade long was a bit difficult, as there wasn't a site with consolidated reviews. I definitely thought a game like Pokemon Blue/Red would have been the highest rated game, which sold over 30 million units, but surprisingly it actually received mixed reviews at the time, with Nintendo Power giving it a 7.2 out of 10, and a Japanese magazine named Famitsu giving it a measly 29 out of 40. With that being the case, after a bit of digging and head scratching, I was finally able to figure out that The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening was for sure the highest rated game on the system. This classic action-adventure game was the fourth installment in the series, released in North America in August of 1993. Garnering perfect scores from many reviewers like IGN and Nintendo Life, the game was praised for its extreme depth, with the Washington Post's Chips Carter declaring that Nintendo had made a legend that fits in the palm of your hand. This portability was really what amazed almost everyone at that time, with many touting it as excellent for those who don't have time to sit at home and play endless hours. A title like this one is really a testament to Nintendo's ability to make extremely comprehensive and fun games that are still heavily played to this day. The lowest reviewed game on the Game Boy that I could find is one I actually never heard about called Titus the Fox, developed by, Titus Software. Released in 1992, this game wasn't actually new by any means, and a form of it had appeared on several different home systems like the Atari ST, MS-DOS, and Commodore's Amiga. Almost every review for this Game Boy title, however, points that Titus, the main character and company's mascot, has a terrible looking in-game model and actually looks nothing like the character that we've seen in other versions. There's other huge differences, more in terms of gameplay, as many elements that had been seen in previous versions, such as entering doors, jumping higher in certain stages, using ladders, and picking up mini items to use as weapons were completely removed or stripped down to accommodate for the Game Boy's capabilities. This was another huge complaint from most reviewers, as it was really clear from those who played past versions of the game that the developers didn't port this game properly at all, and it was either not given its full attention or most likely the team was put under some sort of time crunch. This game never received a sequel in any other system, and it's safe to say that it really wasn't needed. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System was the company's next home console entry, which was released in 1991 and had a lifespan that lasted in North America until 1999. The SNES had vastly better graphics than the NES before it, and could even simulate 3D effects, although not too well, which allowed for much longer and higher quality games. With a library of 717 North American titles, the highest reviewed game actually came to me as no surprise in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, released in April of 1992. Actually coming out before the Game Boy's Link's Awakening, this title greatly expanded on what made the original two in the series so awesome, while adding elements that would become franchise staples like the Master Sword, Hookshot, the Spin Attack, and Heart Containers. It also added more complex dungeons with much tougher puzzles, which is a feature that's still present in modern 3D Zeldas. The absolute lowest score I could find for this game came from a magazine called Electronic Gaming Monthly, who gave it a surprisingly low score of 8.75 out of 10. To this day, this title still shows up on many best of all times lists, with its best placing being when it came in third on Nintendo's top 200 games of all time. I don't have to say much else about this masterpiece, as it was revolutionary, enormous, and really still holds up perfectly to this day. Now, actually figuring out the worst rated game on the system is a bit more difficult, as I could easily give that distinction to a game like Pit Fighter, which was widely criticized for its incredibly slow fighting gameplay and unresponsive controls, or one like Race Drive-In, which is played with horrible graphics and only ran at about 2 to 3 frames, which seems like a game that was released a decade before it. However, the actual lowest rated game on the system was the original Shaq Fu, released in October of 1994. By that time, Shaquille O'Neal had become the biggest, pun intended, athlete on the planet, appearing in movies, TV shows, having his own record, and eventually landing his very own video game. The premise is pretty silly. Shaq walks into a dojo before attending a charity basketball game in Japan and travels to an alternate dimension where he has to rescue a young boy from an evil mummy. Strange premise aside, this game received incredibly bad reviews, with some saying it was fun once you get used to the controls, with others noting that Shaq was almost unrecognizable in his own game. However, it was clear that a lot of people disliked Shaq at that time, and a few reviews even said that his ego had gotten so big that it had developed its own gravitational pull. It's not those reviews that I really looked at for this video, it's actually the retroactive reviews done years later which led to my decision to give this game the distinction of the worst on this system. Pretty much every review talks about how the computer AI are pretty much broken, both in the way they move, fight you, and when you hit them, it just doesn't seem to ever land a punch. Their hitboxes are just off. I think the nail in the coffin is that there's actually a website out there where they try to find every single last copy of this game so they can be destroyed. Whoa. Nintendo's next home console was also one of the first ever to sport 3D polygon graphics called the N64, which was released in 1996, having a lifespan until 2002. Although it had a relatively low 297 North American release titles, the system sported many masterpieces, which would turn out to be some of my favorite and most memorable of all time. That being said, it's no surprise to me that the highest rated game is Zelda: The Ocarina of Time, released worldwide during Christmas of 1998. Receiving a perfect score from almost every major reviewer, this game was seen in a similar light to A Link to the Past, as it contains open-world gameplay with puzzles and dungeons to explore, but this time in a 3D realm. IGN praised it for its combat, exploration, and puzzle-solving elements, saying that it set the benchmark for interactive entertainment which will shape the RPG genre for years to come. This was also backed up by GameTrailer.com, who stated that it was basically a walking patent office due to the number of features it contained that became industry standard. Personally, to this day, I've never been more satisfied in completing a game, as I was fully immersed in every second of Hyrule Kingdom, and remember being genuinely afraid of the very menacing bad guy, Ganondorf. Picking the lowest rated game on this system is actually extremely easy, as it's considered by many, including myself, to be the very worst N64 title, which is Superman 64, made by Titus Interactive, released in 1999. Panned across the board by every single reviewer at that time, and retroactively to add on to that, appearing on almost every worst games of all time list, as there really aren't any positive aspects to this strange game. As a person who rented this game from Blockbuster as a kid, I remember feeling as if it wasn't even completed, as the graphics of the world around you look abysmal, enemies you fought were buggy and barely did anything, the gameplay was boring and broken, and the story was non-existent with a terrible plot. IGN wrote that it was clear that the developer had not put forth any priorities for this title to finish it, as it feels rushed with really no care. Joe Fielder of GameSpot gave the game a 1.3 out of 10, stating that he found several areas in the environment that had suspect collision detection and obvious bugs that vie for your attention. In a response, Titus Interactive came out with a statement saying that more than 70% of their target audience, which was 6 to 11-year-olds, rated the game an A, which now looking back in the future was quite obviously a lie to save face. Nintendo's next foray into the handheld market was with the Game Boy Advance, which was released in 2001 and had a lifespan lasting until 2010. Statistically speaking, the best reviewed game for the system was a port of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I'll instead go to the one that came in a pretty close second, called Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, released as a launch title with the system. The creation of this game at the time was massively impressive, as it was just as good or very close to its console counterparts with 3D graphics that actually worked on the Game Boy Advance. One of the weirdest reviews I could find that praised the game came from a now defunct website called Media and Games Online Network, which hilariously stated that if every game that graces the GBA were as good as Tony Hawk 2, then the world would be a better place. There would be no war, crime, or violence because everyone would be too busy playing the Game Boy. What a strange, but I guess suitable review. Now, finding the lowest reviewed game on the system proved to be a bit more difficult, as many seem to give that distinction to Medal of Honor Underground, due to its poor graphics, as they tried to translate first-person shooter aspects of the franchise to a system that couldn't handle it, or something like Sonic the Hedgehog, where that game was a terrible port with gameplay that didn't run smoothly at all, making it look like a bootleg version of the original. However, according to Metacritic, the lowest reviewed game is actually one called The Legends of Wrestling 2, released in 2002 by Powerhead Games. This WWE, wrestling-based fighting game, scored average reviews on its home console version, but was destroyed for how bad the Game Boy Advance version was. Pocket Games, who gave this game a 20 out of 100, wrote, You could compile a flipbook with photographs of your favorite wrestlers and make a better game than this one, while Game Informer gave it an abysmal 1 out of 100, stating, "You should avoid this like a used King Kong Bundy jockstrap." Sometimes games like this one that are so bad, over time can gain a cult following and a bit more notoriety years later. Unfortunately for this game, it's just downright awful. A complete graphical step up from the N64. The Nintendo GameCube was released in North America in November of 2001, having a lifespan until 2007, with a library of 658 games. According to Metacritic, the highest rated game for this console is Metroid Prime, released as a launch title alongside the system. This was a sort of revitalization for the franchise, as it was the first to use 3D graphics and have gameplay from the first-person perspective. Even though a few features had changed since the original games, the objective remained the same. You have to solve puzzles, defeat enemies, and find items to progress through each level. GameCritics.com gave it a perfect 10 out of 10 score, stating that this is a shining example of how a classic video game series can be vividly reborn. While taking an enormous amount of liberties with the original concept, it manages to zero in on the spirit of the original Metroid series and hit a resounding bullseye. Metroid Prime would go on to win numerous Game of the Year awards, with many people giving acclaim to its graphics, level design, immersive atmosphere, and killer soundtrack. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the lowest rated game for the system was one based off a movie released around that time called Charlie's Angels. In this action-adventure game, you play as the three main characters, fighting crime across the globe using disguises, martial arts moves, and solving puzzles to complete each mission. Just like most games based on movies released during this time, this title is a disaster, with Godzilla's review saying that the controls are horrendous, relying on an uncontrollable camera angle that seems to mostly face the wrong way in a 3D game. The end result is that you don't know what you're up against or where you're headed until it's too late. G4 Tech TV added, "We could go on to describe the pointless level design, sloppy controls, and glitches galore. But how much more convincing do you need? Don't buy it." This was Nico Entertainment's first game they ever developed, and would continue to make lower quality ones until they stopped production in 2016. The Nintendo Dual Screen, or DS for short, was the company's next generation of handheld console, integrating a touchscreen, which was released first in North America in November of 2004, having a lifespan that lasted until 2013. A game that I never realized was the highest rated for the system was one I actually played extensively called Grand Theft Auto: Chinatown Wars, which was developed by Rockstar Games and released in 2009. This title returns the franchise to its original top-down open-world gameplay, but adds many of its own unique features which makes it feel like a brand new experience. This was exactly what was reflected in Giant Bomb's review of the game, which stated, "The developers of Rockstar Leeds were very smart about which elements of GTA to carry over and which would just drag the final product down. The end result is a game that feels new and fresh, even though it largely relies on the concept forged in its past." In my opinion, I always remember feeling like this game was a bit out of place as a Nintendo title, but that was a good thing as it surprised me when I finally played it. There really are a few games that I would have personally thought would have been the lowest rated on the DS, but oddly enough, with a score of 20 out of 100 on Metacritic, that distinction goes to Deal or No Deal, which is a game based on the TV show by the same name made by Gravity Eye. If you younger viewers are unfamiliar with the game show, the concept behind it is that the contestant chooses one of 26 numbered briefcases, which contain money ranging from 1 cent to $1 million, and is really based on luck, as you have to decide whether to sell that case back to the banker and run away with the cash, or risk it all hoping for the big bucks. How any developers, creators, or publishers thought this would be a fun game that people would want to play is mind-boggling. And I think this review by Game Almighty really sums things up nicely when they say, "You'll wonder why you bought this game when you could just be picking random numbers out of a hat. When you see this title on a shelf of a local retailer, if you're smarter than a 5th grader, then your final answer will be No Deal." Nintendo's next home console foray was with the highly successful Wii, which was released in time for Christmas of 2006 and had a lifespan that lasted till 2013. Selling a whopping 101.63 million units and containing a massive library of over 1,500 titles, It was really no surprise to me that the two games that are the highest rated with an identical score of 97 out of 100 are Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. I really don't have to say much about these two out-of-the-world experiences, as they both received Game of the Year praise across multiple different outlets and changed the way everyone thought Mario games could be played. I consider both to be the best and my favorite in the franchise, even if Nintendo completely snubbed the second from their 35th Mario anniversary celebration. The lowest rated game on the system is one called Spogs Racing, made by Pronto Games in 2008. In this one, you have the objective of customizing your own vehicle in wacky ways in an attempt to destroy your opponents. Scoring an awful 19 out of 100 on Metacritic, almost every reviewer has cited it for its ugly, insulting graphics, and a reviewer who goes by the name of Hardcore Gaming even went as far as saying that the music will make you leave the game feeling like you've just been punched in the head a few times. I noticed throughout the console's history that there were a lot of very low-graded WiiWare games, where it was obvious that companies were looking for a quick cash grab. Spogs Racing was no different, and was even declared Metacritic's Wii Dud of the Year. Nintendo's last true handheld console came in the form of the 3DS, which was released in early 2011 and had a lifespan that just ended this year in 2020. The system itself is very unique, as it contains a state-of-the-art screen, allowing the user to view games with full 3D effect without the use of the usually required glasses. With a total of 1,344 titles, the highest rated game of all time on the system is one that we've already actually seen in this video, The Legend of Zelda, The Ocarina of Time, but now 3D. With revitalized graphics, crisp sound, but the same old game that everyone loves, this title is considered by many as the best remaster of all time. Quick selection of items was also added, which is one of the biggest complaints about the N64 version, as you would constantly have to pause the game to select the one that you wanted. I really don't have much else to say about this game, but for some reason if you haven't played it, I'd highly suggest you give it a try. Now, the lowest rated game on the 3DS is another one based off a TV show that I actually had never heard about called Tenkai Knights Brave Battle, developed by Bandai Namco in 2014. This game is all about building your own custom robots, then using them to fight against others in a horrible looking platforming setting. That's pretty much all you do in this absolutely pointless game, as most reviews I've read about it talk about how boring the gameplay is, with someone called Cube3 saying, "There's nothing fundamentally broken about this game, and Tenkai Knights Brave Battle has a pleasant atmosphere and presentation. However, it is blunted by the lackluster and repetitive gameplay, along with controls that lack polish." Throughout this video, I've noticed a common theme with the lower rated games, as they tend to be ones that have been made off of the license of another IP, showing that developers are more interested in making a quick buck than caring about making a well-polished, finished product. Nintendo's biggest failure, in terms of mainline home consoles, was the Wii U, which was released in 2012 and had a relatively short lifespan that lasted until 2017. Even though the console really didn't sell well and great games were sparse, the highest rated one on this console is also one of my favorites of all time, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Okay, I do understand that this was released also on the Nintendo Switch at the same time, but it's important to note that the distinction between generations didn't actually give up anything in terms of graphics or gameplay, which is why it still received top reviews. According to Metacritic, the lowest overall rated game on the system is one called Family Party 30 Great Games Obstacle Arcade, which received one of the lowest scores I've ever seen at 11 out of 100. Developed by Art Co. and released in the winter of 2012, this was meant to be a fun, party-based multiplayer title, but ended up being absolutely terrible, with Christopher Nyron of Eurogamer saying that its graphics feel extremely outdated and has controls that frequently malfunction, making some of the minigames unplayable. Nintendo World Report went on to say, "The game makes a promise it can't keep, assaults your ears with annoying voice acting, and sucks all the fun out of owning a Wii U." In my opinion, when companies try to entice people with gimmicky minigames, it's always a tough sell, especially if the controls aren't easy enough to pick up and play. Nintendo's most recent and highly successful console is of course the Switch, which was released in North America in March of 2017 and still has an active library to this day. This system has two games that both have a score of 97 out of 100, but because we've already talked about Breath of the Wild, I'll have to go with Super Mario Odyssey as the highest rated on this console. This incredibly stunning evolution in the Mario series follows the titular character through several expansive kingdoms alongside your new hat buddy, Cappy. What makes Cappy's ability so special is that he allows you to capture most enemies, becoming them and using their unique abilities to collect moons. Level Up wrote a review which reads, Super Mario Odyssey is a jewel that shines with perfect controls, fresh possibilities, and gameplay variety. An experience filled with surprises and challenges to explore everywhere. All kinds of players will remember Odyssey as one of the best entries in the series for generations to come. Honestly, I couldn't say it better myself. The worst rated game for the Switch is one I actually played a long time ago on this channel called Vroom in the Night Sky, made by Poisoft, released exclusively to the eShop in 2017. In this game, you play as a magical girl named Luna, riding on her flying motorbike with the objective of collecting key stars, which plays hilariously similarly to Superman 64. Hobby Consoles, which gave it a 15 out of 100, wrote, Vroom is the worst of the first Nintendo Switch titles. An uninspired racing game with poor graphics, hideous sound effects, and boring gameplay. 4players.de gave it an even lower review of 5 out of 100, saying, This is not the Nindy game you're looking for. Stay away from this. The visuals are reminiscent of the N64 era, and there is hardly any game to be found. I totally agree with those reviews, and quite honestly think that Nintendo needs to do a little bit of a better job at screening games that they want to release on their eShop. Alright, that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I know it was a little bit longer than usual, but I really hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please leave a like, comment below, and of course subscribe to my channel. I also do have an Instagram at Copycat Gamer where I upload some cool clips and items from my collection that you won't see anywhere else. Hope you guys all have a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!